One of the most well-known behavioral theorists is that of Abraham Maslow, a Russian Jew, and essentially Maslow's hierarchy of motivational needs has yet to be beaten. It is one of the most well-known, well-documented, well-used models in industry and in education today. Maslow essentially says that regardless of race, color, culture, or creed, we're all suspect to 5 basic motivational needs. The first one being physiological needs, and these needs have to do with food, shelter, sex, water. It speaks to what we basically need to survive. And it makes sense that if those needs aren't being satisfied, that's essentially where we're going to stay before we attempt even to progress through the hierarchy of motivational needs. So we'll always seek, first and foremost, to settle our physiological needs. The second level of needs has to do with safety and security. And this speaks to the fact that we need to operate and work in an environment where we feel safe, we need to be secure. And this has implications for the workplace as well. Essentially, in our jobs, we need to be able to know that we are secure in our jobs, that we are being supported in our jobs, that we have the resources that we require to work and the necessary tools as well as the competence, etc., etc. So essentially, we have the physiological needs followed by safety and security needs. The next level of needs speaks to something that Abraham Maslow describes as being our social needs. And what he says is, he says that people are essentially social beings. We are gregarious creatures. And what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to relate to others, and we certainly need to belong to part of a team or part of a group. We don't live in isolation. In fact, we often need to recognize the value of others in our lives, and we need to feel that we are of value and we are contributing to society and to the people around us. And this is a very strong driver. It's described as being one of the motivational needs, and it's something that we all seek to satisfy, sometimes more consciously than others. And while I've said that typically we need to progress through the hierarchy of motivational needs, sometimes we do go backwards and forwards in terms of these needs. And an example would be as follows. Assume for a moment that a whole lot of business people are going on a conference. So they walk into this conference venue, they don't know anybody else, and you'll find that what people do is they gravitate towards the table where there's food, where there's drink, and they start eating and drinking. And what they're essentially doing is they've actually been stripped of their social needs, of the security needs, because it's potentially a different environment, and they're seeking to satisfy, once again, the physiological needs of food and water. But we've spoken about physiological, we've spoken about safety and security, we've discussed social. I'd now like to spend a moment or two talking about esteem needs. This is in fact the next level of need, the need that we all have for a healthy and positive self-esteem. Our self-esteem can be equated to something known as ego or our self-worth. And our self-worth is a mental picture that we have of ourselves based on our past successes and failure. And one's self-esteem often determines so much about us in life, how successful, how happy we will be, how we'll contribute. So self-esteem is a critical need that we're always trying to satisfy. And finally, the highest level of the need hierarchy has to do with that of self-actualization. I've made mention of this in addressing the issue just prior, but essentially self-actualization has to do with the fact that we're always seeking to achieve and understand more and more of our potential. It is the area of the unknown, and sometimes we attempt things or we experiment in a particular area, and we find that we're actually gifted in that area. And that is why with children often it's a good idea to expose them to a different array of sport or to different musical instruments, and you'll find that, well, you know, they're being exposed to something now. A child has been given an opportunity to play a piano, and we find that they excel. And so with self-actualization, it's often good to expose ourselves to different things, because it's in those hidden things, it's in those areas of the unknown where we might be able to realize more and more of our potential. But largely speaking, when these other needs are in play, we're able to dream, we're able to think, we're able to envision, we're able to find the time to find new ways of living and contributing and enjoying and realizing more of our self-esteem. Now, something particularly useful that Abraham Maslow did, and it's something that not a lot of people know, is that when Abraham Maslow died, he was actually working on how he could take his hierarchy of motivational needs and overlay it onto organizations. And essentially what he was saying is that the first two needs, the physiological and the safety and security needs, relate from an organizational perspective to something called organizational survival. They need to have proper books. They need to recognize that cash flow is king. They need to be managing things properly in terms of being administrative experts. Secondly, what Abraham Maslow was saying is that the security needs and the social needs speaks to organizational success. When people operate together and when people have a healthy self-esteem, so esteem needs comes into the second part of the organizational model. So we have Maslow's hierarchy of motivational needs, which we now know is physiological, safety and security, social, esteem, and self-actualization. The organizational model at the bottom of the rung, it speaks of organizational success, then it speaks of organizational survival, then of organizational success, and then of organizational transformation. And self-actualization essentially equates to organizational transformation. So when the organization is doing more than surviving, in fact it's thriving, they're enjoying a measure of success, it's at that point where organizations typically leverage resources in support of saying, well, what is it going to take us to the next level of performance? What's going to take us to the next level of achievement as far as our team, as far as our results are concerned? And that arena is described as being organizational transformation, where we start actually changing shape in the sense that we're so good at what we do, we're now able to enter other arenas and essentially make a profit. There is a psychometric assessment called the FIRO-B. It's F-I-R-O. It's F-I-R-O-B, FIRO-B, and it stands for Fundamental Interpersonal Relationship Orientation Behavior. And this is also a particularly good psychometric assessment or psychometric tool in terms of understanding motivation. Essentially what this tool does is it looks at human beings, and it looks at the interpersonal needs. And interpersonal needs is often a huge motivator as well. And essentially what this instrument talks about is the fact that we all have three interpersonal needs, and it's essentially the need for control. And what the FIRO-B does particularly well is it talks about something called expressed behavior as well as wanted behavior. So when it comes to control, to what degree do we express control? Do we seek to control others? And to what degree do we want to be controlled? So that's the first area, control. The second is inclusion. Again, to what degree do we include others? Do we express inclusion? And to what degree do we want to be included? And finally, affection. To what degree do we express affection? And to what degree do we want affection? And I think when we can get clear about that as individuals and that as teams, it really speaks to what ultimately motivates us. Is it control? Is it inclusion? Is it, in fact, affection? McClelland, another behavioral and motivational theorist, spoke about the theory of learned needs. And in a nutshell, he mentioned three things, power, achievement, and affiliation. He said that some people are motivated by power. And it's not the need to necessarily control or dominate others. He said no. He said some people are motivated by power. They need to say, and then they desire to have a say in how objectives are reached. In fact, they need to have a say in what objectives are agreed upon in terms of performance. They're power-oriented, power-motivated people. They like to have a say in what gets done, in how it gets done. And secondly, McClelland spoke about the fact that some people are achievement-motivated. And what this essentially means is that people are motivated by a job well done. So all they seek to do is they seek to do well, they seek to perform well, and when that gets done, they feel motivated. They feel satisfied, they feel that in fact they have achieved, and that is a great source of motivation to them. So power, achievement, and finally affiliation. Some people are affiliation motivated. They are motivated because they have good, healthy working relationships with other people. And when those relationships sometimes go sour, they are very, very easily demotivated. But when things are going well, when they're able to communicate, when they're able to share, when they're able to relate very well to others, it serves as a high degree of motivation. Finally, I want to say this, and that is that motivation is a fairly broad topic. But I think that we've essentially covered the elements. We've looked at some of the theorists. We've looked at hedonism. We've looked at self-actualization. We've looked at man's search for meaning and for demystifying uncertainty. We've looked at Maslow. We've spoken about the motivational equation. We've also spoken about McClelland. And I think that motivation is something that is, again, it is something that is from within. It's something that we need to constantly work at as individuals and as teams. We need to ask ourselves questions about what we're doing, how that relates to us personally and meaningfully, and in that way spur ourselves on to action, which leads to self-actualization and will generate and give us the results that we desire. Thank you.